I don't know about you, but I feel like as Christians we have this view that one day, we'll have this perfect relationship with God and we won't sin anymore. We don't really put it out there, but it's something we think about because as humans we like to have ideals. We like to have something we're aiming towards. And I think it's important for us to realize that that's never going to happen. Like we're never going to get to a place where we're perfectly aligned with God and we never sin, right? We'll have something we're aiming towards is to have a good, close relationship with God where we completely rely on Him and we're strong in our relationship with God. But I think the ideal that we aim at, where I'm gonna hear God's voice perfectly every single day, and I'm gonna follow it perfectly, and I won't sin anymore. It's just something that's never gonna happen. And I think it's just important for us to realize that God is not in love with some future perfect version of you. God loves you right now as you are. Now, Jesus did say, come as you are, but it's not stay as you are. But the importance of that is that He still loves you before you've become this perfect version, right? And I think a perfect thing to go back to is the Gospels, when Jesus called all the people. When He called all the apostles, when He called all the apostles, and then when He went and He called Mary and all of them, right? He didn't say, "Oh, go and do this thing, be cleansed of your sin, and then come." He just said, "Follow me," right? Like when you look at the way He went and fetched Matthew, it was kind of just like, "Follow me." Now, I don't know if I don't remember actually reading that in the Bible. That's more from The Chosen, so I need to be careful with that. But Jesus never ever asked anyone to be perfect. He just said, "Follow me." And obviously that's one, that's the Gospels, that's the New Testament. But you can even go back to the Old Testament. You look at Exodus, going back to the second book of the Bible, when God pulls the Israelites out of slavery, out of bondage from the Egyptians. He doesn't say, "Oh, do this and then I'll pull you out." Like when does he give them the law? He gives them the law after He saves them from slavery, after He pulls them out of bondage. And He gives it to them just before they're about to enter the promised land. And it wasn't here's the law, do these things perfectly, then I'll take you out of slavery. It was, I'm taking you out of slavery because I love you, and then I give you the law because this is how I want you to live, because now you're my child. And a perfect analogy to really put this in perspective is one I literally heard these two sermons in the same week, and they used the exact same analogy. I was listening to a sermon by John Bevere, and I was listening to a sermon by Matt Chandler, and they spoke about how our relationship with God is kind of like a marriage, right? And it's an interesting analogy to use because we're the bride of Christ. And they were saying that, so I'll say Matt Chandler, right? Matt Chandler was saying that I married my wife 20 odd years ago, and she's not more my wife today than she was that day that I married her. But when I did marry her, the way she was expected to act changed, right? Or we'll use him, right? He was like, when I got married to my wife 20 years ago, right? I'm not more her husband today than I was on that day. Like the day I got married to her, I was her husband, end of story. But the day I became a husband, I was called to act a certain way, right? I wasn't expected to be going out there, flirting with other girls, going out on dates with other women, giving out my number, all of that. Those are things that, because I'm now her husband, I'm expected to leave those behind, right? But I was her husband on the day that I got married to her, and that's a similar thing with us and our salvation, right? When God calls us, right, when we give our life to Christ, we're expected to start acting a certain way. But again, you're not more a Christian when you do these things than when you don't. So going back to the husband-wife analogy, right? John Bevere was saying that if I go out and I start going on dates with other women and I start giving out my numbers to other women and start flirting with other women, again, I'm still her husband. That's not going to change the fact that I'm a husband. Now, you were saying marrying my wife, I'm probably not going to be her husband much longer. She'll probably kill me. That's what he was saying. But the matter of the fact remains the same. I'm still her husband, whether or not I go and I do these things. But because I'm a husband, I'm expected to not do these things, right? And that's a similar thing with Christianity. When you become saved, right? You're saved because you've made a choice to give your life to Christ, right? Now, because you've given your life to Christ, you're expected to act a certain way, right? You're expected to pursue sanctification. You're expected to pursue His holiness. You're expected to pursue God and act in a certain way, right? But again, whether you do those things or not doesn't make you less saved or more saved. You are saved as long as you have sincere faith in Jesus Christ, which I'll get to just now, right? You're saved as long as you have that sincere faith. But if you have sincere faith, going back to the analogy, if you're truly a husband, right, and you truly identify as a husband, you're not going to go and do all these other things, right? Similar with Christianity. If you have true faith, you're not going to want to go and do all these other things of the world, right? You're going to want to follow God's commandments. Jesus said in John, if you love me, you will follow my commandments, right? But again, you're not closer or further away when you sin. Now I want to go to the topic of faith versus works. Now, if you want to complete just understanding or basic understanding of faith versus works, go read the book of James. And then if you really want to get into like the nitty gritties, which those are rough. I think like when you look at the denominations we have, like I mean there's all these denominations, but if you look at like, for example, the issue with Catholicism, right? It's very subtle, like the issue of like salvation, but like they believe, you're saved by grace. They'll say they believe they're saved by grace, but if you look at their teachings, if you look at the teachings of the original Catholic Church, it's you're saved by grace, you're saved by grace and your works, right? You're saved by your faith and your works. If you don't have the works, if you're not doing the works, you're not saved. That's what they say, which is a false gospel. It's completely wrong. Then you also look at like the Calvinists, for example. There's this issue they have with like believing faith is a work, and if you like made a choice, if you believe like I made the choice to believe in Jesus, I have something to do with my salvation, which is just false, because Romans, which Romans is it? It's Romans something too. In Romans, like Paul goes through the explanation of faith not being a work. But now we're getting into like too much theology. That's like if you really want to get like a really strong understanding of what faith is. But genuinely, if you want a general overview of what faith versus works is, go read the book of James, right? Now, with that concept of faith versus works, basically what the doctrine says is that you're saved by your faith alone, right? If you put your faith in Jesus Christ, you will be saved, right? But the thing is, when James says faith without works is dead, it doesn't mean that if I do works, like so if I do my faith and I go do what the Catholics do, and I take my communion, I go and I do this, I confess my sins and all of that, it doesn't mean that, if I have faith and I do this, I'm saved. No, you're saved because of your faith alone, right? But if your faith in Jesus is sincere, right? So going back to the analogy, if you truly are married, if you truly are her husband, and you truly believe that I am her husband, right? And you identify as that, your works are going to show through that, right? The way you act is going to show that, oh yes, this guy is a husband, right? Similar thing with your faith. If you have true and sincere faith in Jesus Christ, your works are going to show as a fruit of that faith, right? And it's important for us to realize that. So I think one thing I want to touch on is the concept of feeling, far from God when I sin and close to God when I don't sin. There's an element of pride, interwoven into that, because it's like, oh, I'm doing these good things, I'm so good right now. If you believe you're far away from God because you're sinning, it's a show that you believe that you're close to God when you're doing all the good things, right? Which I guess there's an intricacy in that analogy, but basically the pride is there. If you feel like I'm far away from God because I stumbled here, then it means you feel like you're close to God because you're doing well, which means you're losing again the whole concept of faith. Saved by faith, not works. It's not your works, it's not your own strength, it's not what you do that gets you to heaven. It's your faith in Jesus that gets you to heaven. But sin does take us far away from God. But where your issue shouldn't be in the fact that, like, okay, I've done these things and now I'm close to God, or I've not done these things and now I'm not close to God. But you should look at them from the lens of them being a fruit of your faith, right? It should be like, okay, when I am doing these good things, it's because I am close to God. It's because I'm seeking God, and I have my faith in God, and He's working through me, which means that my works are showing as a fruit of this. Now, when I am sinning, again, it's not the act of me sinning that takes me away from God, right? It's my faith and how close I am to God that keeps me close to God or takes me away from God. So now when I am sinning, it is a show that my relationship with God is not proper, for lack of a better word, right? The reason I'm far from God when I sin isn't because I've done the wrong thing, so that's taken me far away from God, but it is because I've not been putting all of my reliance and strength in God. Therefore, the sin is showing as a work of my flesh, if that makes any sense, right? So it's important to remember it's your faith that saves you, and then your works are just a fruit of that. And if you look at it through that lens, then you're good. And it's quite interesting that the Council of Trent, for those of you that don't know, it's the doctrine of Catholicism, literally says if you believe that your works are not what helps you get saved, but rather they're simply a fruit of your faith. Let you be anathema is what it says. And anathema just basically means you're an abomination, you're not saved, you're going to hell, right? Which is nonsense, absolute nonsense, pure nonsense. But don't get me started with the Catholics. But anyways, yeah, I think that's kind of where I was going with it. But yeah, I think I've finished the video there. You guys let me know what you think of the topic. It's a, I don't say heavy one. It's just, yeah. God is not in love with some future version of you. Like, he loves you right now as you are, but he wants you because once you become saved, once he saves you, once he takes you out of Egypt, right? Once you become his child, he gives you the commandments to be like, this is how my child acts. These are the commandments they follow, because they trust in me, and they trust that I have a plan for them through following these commandments, through leading a certain life. But yeah, you guys let me know what you think of the topic in the comment section below. But until next time, see you guys.